Welcome to Box Recaps. Today I'm going to explain the movie Son of the Mask, released in the year 2005. 11 years after the first film, Dr. Arthur Newman is giving a tour of the Hall of Norse Mythology in the Edge City Museum on a stormy night, as a man in black comes in to view the hall. Dr. Newman tells the story of Norse mythology. He tells about Odin, Thor, the god of thunder, and Balder, the god of beauty. When a kid points at a picture and asks, "Who is that ugly guy?" the doctor tells him that it was Loki, the god of mischief. As the youngest son of Odin, Loki was the black sheep of the family. Loki's constant mischievous acts were an embarrassment for Odin and the family. He created the mask thousands of years ago and unleashed it on Earth to spread his mischief. According to legends, those who wear it are imbued with the powers of Loki. The boy asks Dr. Newman if that was true, and he replies no, as if it was true, he would have been wearing the mask himself. He goes on by saying that Loki also had the power of turning himself into anyone, even a woman. When Dr. Newman also mentions that Loki brought nothing but shame to Odin and the family, so Odin punished and imprisoned Loki, the stranger in the black hat and suit becomes furious and transforms, revealing himself to be Loki. He shouts that Odin did not. The tourists panic and flee, but Dr. Newman stays to argue with the angry god. Loki takes the mask from the display, only to realize it is a replica. He says that this is a fake, and Dr. Newman says that this is a good replica. In anger, Loki removes Dr. Newman's still talking face from his body and puts it on the mask stand. As the security comes in, Loki starts to fire shots at their feet from his fingers, making a hole around them in the ground. They fell down into the hole, and Loki stormed out of the museum in a whirlwind of rage, shouting, "Where is my mask?" Meanwhile, the next day, the real mask makes its way to Fringe City, not far from Edge City. As the mask is floating in a stream, it is found by a dog named Otis. The dog grabs the mask in his mouth and runs towards the city. Otis belongs to Tim Avery, an aspiring cartoonist at an animation company, who's feeling reluctant to accept parenthood with his wife Tanya. Tim and Tanya are visiting their friends, who have many kids, and Tim is really intimidated by the kids. On their way back, Tanya is trying to talk Tim into having kids. As Tim plays video games, his wife tells him that if you have a baby, he will at least have someone to play video games with. Tim does not respond and keeps on playing the game, so Tanya takes the video game and throws it in the back seat. Tim tries to make it up to her. As they get back home, Otis also arrives with the mask in his mouth. Tim is trying to make it up to Tanya and tells her that he wants to have a baby, just not now. Tanya shuts the door of their room, leaving Tim out. Tim turns around and finds Otis standing there. He goes with Otis to the doghouse and starts to play with him. After playing for a while, he sits down and Otis brings the mask to him. Tim takes the mask and tells Otis that if you have to steal something, at least steal something which has good value. He then asks Otis if he wants Tim to have a baby, and Otis shakes his head in a way to say no. Tanya is standing at the door and watching them. The next scene takes us to Odin, who's shouting with anger. As Loki is sitting at a beach, Odin's face appears from the clouds and asks him if he has found his mask or not. Loki tells him that he found a mask, but it was not his. Odin gets angry again and scolds him. Loki tells him to use his all-seeing eye and see where the mask is. Odin tells him that this is his mess, and he must clean it up. Odin tells him to find his mask before he strikes him with lightning. As Tim is working on his cartoons, Tanya mocks him about the baby, and he starts to explain to her that he's been working on his cartoons for 10 years now. Tanya tells him she understands that he wanted his work to get better, but she really wants to have a baby. At the moment, Tim's job involves him dressing up as a tour guide called Torpedo Tortoise and working alongside his best friend Jorge, who's very shy and nervous around women, while desperately trying to pitch an idea for a cartoon to his boss, Daniel Moss. Jorge tells Tim to be a man and go talk to Daniel Moss about his idea. Tim walks up to him and tells him how he's been working on this project. Daniel agrees to listen to him. After listening to what Tim had today, Daniel tells him that his idea misses a spark, but Daniel's door is always open for new ideas. Later that night, it is Halloween, and Tim gifts a sketchbook to Tanya, in which he's drawn an animated character giving his heart to a woman who's been crying. Tanya really likes it and asks Tim what he was wearing for the party. He tells her that Otis has ruined his mask, so he has only the outfit to wear. Tanya asks him to wear the mask that Otis found, and Tim tells her that he really would have been happy if she joined him at the party. She tells him that she has a lot of work to catch up to, and Tim should go, and he should wear the mask. As Tim reaches the party, he puts on the mask outside of the studio in his car. The mask transforms him into an eccentric, green-faced party animal. As he is about to enter the party, the man at the door asks for his ID. Tim fools around with him before showing him a fake ID, and he gets into the party. The party really sucks. Tim notices Jorge's crush, Sylvia, standing alone in the back, eagerly confronts her, and has her stripped out of her costume and into a skimpy red bathing suit before spinning her into Jorge's arms, which pleases them both. When the company party turns out to be a bore, Tim uses his mask powers to perform a remix of Can't Take My Eyes Off You, therefore making the party a success. Tim returns to his house that night, and while still wearing the mask, he has sex with Tanya. The baby is conceived as Tim still has the mask on. The next day, as Tim gets up hearing the alarm sounds, he drops the mask, and Otis picks up the mask and runs away. Tim goes to the office, and Jorge tells him that he was great at the party last night. Everyone is appreciating Tim for making the party so great. Daniel, Tim's boss, calls him into his office and tells him that he loved Tim's character for the party and has decided to make a cartoon of that character. He also promotes Tim. Tim rushes back home and starts to look for the mask, but he cannot find it anywhere. He spots Otis and tells him that if he helps him find the mask, then he'll take him out. This makes Otis happy, and he runs away as Tanya gets in the front door of the house. Tim and Tanya both tell each other that they had good news. Tim goes first and tells Tanya that he just got promoted. They both start to dance with happiness. Then Tanya tells him that she thinks that she might be pregnant. They go to the doctor to confirm it. The doctor tells them that she is pregnant, and suddenly Tanya wants to vomit. As she goes to the dustbin, bubbles come out of her mouth instead of vomit, which shocks them. During her pregnancy, Tanya has the weirdest cravings ever. Back at the office, Tim is really trying to sell his ideas to his boss and the team, but is failing badly. They go see an ultrasound of the baby, in which Tim sees the baby is dancing a Mexican dance. The baby, Alvy, is born. Tim and Tanya both are very happy. As Tim tells the baby that he's his dad, the baby starts to cry. The baby is born with the same powers as the mask, which alerts Odin. Loki is looking at an antique store for his mask and finds another replica. Figuring out that it's a replica, Loki breaks some items, and the store clerk tells him that he'll have to pay for them. Loki gets angry and starts to throw things at him. Then, possessing a store clerk, Odin informs Loki about this and tells him that if he finds the child, he'll find the mask. Otis has now moved out of the house, and he has the mask in his new doghouse. Otis's old room now belongs to baby Alvy. Tim and Tanya are really happy with their newborn baby. As Tim is going to the office, he asks Tanya if she has seen the mask, and if she sees it, she must tell him. He leaves for the office then. Loki turns into a bee to get into a hospital, and then he transforms into a nurse, and he finds out all the details about baby Alvy. Back at home, the baby is driving Tim and Tanya crazy. The baby is doing some really weird things, but Tim and Tanya are not noticing that. Otis is the only one who is observing the weird stuff the baby has been doing. After some time, Tanya has to go on a business trip to New York, leaving Tim with their son. Tim, who's been promoted at work, desperately tries to work on his cartoons at home, but is disrupted by Alvy. Alvy does not stop crying no matter what Tim does. A call comes from Tim's office, telling Tim that the boss wants to see his drawings as soon as possible. As Tim is about to get back to work, Alvy makes poop in his diapers. Tanya calls to check in, and even though Tim is really tensed because of Alvy, he tells her that everything was fine. Tanya talks to Alvy, and the baby gets really happy listening to Tanya's voice. After the call, Tim tells Alvy that isn't it great that his mother's work is going great, and on the other hand, Tim was screwed. Alvy suddenly says the word mama, which shocks Tim. Tim asks the baby to say dada, or dad, but the baby replies in a manly voice, and says the word mother. Tim really gets confused. Meanwhile, Loki is looking for the baby. He's going through the list he took from the hospital. Loki goes to a house disguised as a vacuum cleaner salesperson. There, Loki traps the lady of the house in the vacuum and goes to check on the baby, but finds that it's not the baby he's looking for. In order to get some peace and quiet, Tim lets Alvy watch some cartoons. He asks Otis to keep an eye on him. Alvy, whose intelligence has been amplified by the mask, devilishly obtains the idea to mess with his father's head by using his mask powers. Meanwhile, Otis, who has been feeling neglected by Tim because of Alvy, dons the mask by accident and becomes a crazed animal version of himself. He tries to get rid of Alvy, but all his attempts are overturned by the much craftier infant. Tim is running out of the deadline the office gave him. He's really sleepy, but he's still working. When Alvy begins harassing Tim, he notices his son and dog's crazy cartoonish behavior. Loki eventually finds Alvy after searching from house to home for the infant and creating a path of mayhem in his wake, confronts Tim for the mask, and is prevented once more by Alvy, who uses his talents to fend him off. Odin, who is now in Tim's body, eventually becomes tired of Loki's destructive method of disobeying him, and blind to the fact that he has Alvy in his arms, strips his son of his abilities. Tim, who appears to be insane, is dismissed after failing to impress Moss during a pitch, but he's able to reconcile and bond with Alvy. Later that night, Loki, still determined to please his father, infiltrates the Avery home and summons and convinces Odin to give him another opportunity. Odin agrees, but tells his son that he only has 1 hour to reclaim the mask, or else he would be exiled and lose his abilities forever. Loki then abducts Alvy in exchange for the mask, just as Tanya returns from her journey. After Tim recounts everything, the two come across Otis, who is still wearing the mask and is angry at Tim for ignoring him. Tim wins him over by apologizing for not paying enough attention and promising that he and Alvy would get along. Otis is moved and agrees, enabling Tim to remove the dog's disguise. The family finds Loki and gives him the mask, but Loki breaks his promise after bonding with Alvy over their talents. Tim retrieves the mask and redons it, engaging in a high-speed pursuit before facing Loki in a stadium, where Tim and Loki go hand-to-hand. However, because Tim and Loki have equal powers, Loki calls a halt to the fight and recommends that they let Alvy choose who he wants to travel with. Although Loki attempts to entice Alvy with toys and promises of fun, Tim triumphs by removing the mask and asking Alvy to return to him using the human connection he has formed with his kid, convincing Alvy to pick his parents. Loki, saddened and enraged, attempts to destroy the family, but his 1-hour time restriction expires when Odin appears in person. He has lost his patience and considers Loki a failure, but Tim approaches the strong Norse deity and reminds him that despite their issues, they're still father and son. Odin, moved by Tim's remarks, reconciles with Loki and accepts the mask from Tim before the two gods travel to Asgard. Tim gets rehired sometime later after his second animation, based on his own experiences, becomes a smash, and Tanya discloses that she's pregnant again before the film ends. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.